Hello guys, it's Talha here again. So today we are going to learn some math, some calculus. So what we are going to learn will be our function. I'll explain what is a function. I'll explain how to graph a function. I'll explain how to identify whether it is a function or not. Then we are going to learn what are domain and range of a function, and then we are going to learn about piecewise functions, and then we are going to learn about the greatest integer and least integer functions. So let's get started. First, let's discuss what is a function. So, what is a function? Function is basically consisted of two variables. One is a dependent variable which we call y, and one is an independent variable which is called x. So function is the relation between an independent variable and a dependent variable. So this x is an independent variable and this y is a dependent variable. So what is a function? How do we write a function? We write a function like this. We write f of x. So this function of x, y, the dependent variable is a function of x. So we write it like y equals f of x. So this right here is a function. Also, any value which we can input here instead of x, that and it that will be its domain. Any value which we input into the x, that is the domain, the input of this function. And any value which it outputs as y after the function executes, that is our range. But as a standard, what we do is, what is the standard, our standard for our domain and range? So we have to input those numbers which outputs a real value. So domain will be a real domain will be our real numbers, and range should also be our real numbers. Uh, um, Unless a condition is in the formula, or a condition is in the question that you cannot that it's restricted for its domain or range. Our standard should be, and our standard is that our domain should be real numbers and our range should also be real numbers. So for example, let me write a function y equals x squared. So this is a function right here. So let's input some values of x. So what we do is we input x. For example, let's input x equals 1. So when I input y equals 1 square, it will output us 1. When I input y equals minus 1, it also outputs 1, because minus into minus plus, it outputs 1. When I input 2, it gives me 4. When I input minus 2, it also gives me 4. So what is the domain of this function? Like, what values can we input in this function? And what are the values which will not give us a real number? There are no values here which cannot give us a real number. All of them, we can input anything, any real number in this in its domain, and the range will and it won't affect uh, uh, the range. So for example, so the domain of this function is minus infinity up till. So we write domain in form of intervals. So I write minus infinity and up to infinity. So this right here, this braces, I mean this parenthesis is actually denotes that it's an open interval. So that means this infinity thing is not included. And when I'll write this, this square bracket, that will mean that the number or the thing that is written on the left side will be included, but this parenthesis means that the number written here or on the right on the left side are not included. So so this is the domain. Like we can input any number from minus infinity, uh, we can input any negative number, 0, any positive number, and it will give us a real output. But what is the range of this function? For example, I put 0 into it. I put 0. So y equals 0 whole square, it will give me 0. But if I input a negative integer, it gives me a positive integer. So the range of this function right here, range of this function is 0. You notice I have included a square bracket, which means 0 is included in the range, and it can go up to infinity. And notice here I've put a parenthesis, so that means infinity is not included. So its range is minus infinity up to infinity, and its domain is minus infinity and infinity, and its range is 0 up to infinity. So that was domain and range. Let me give you guys another example. So we see y equals x cube. So for y equals x cube, when we put x equals 1, it will give me 1. But when I will put x equals minus 1, it will actually give me minus 1, because minus into minus plus, plus into minus, minus. So here, and the same way, if I will input 2, it will give me 8. But when I'll input minus 2, it will it will actually give me minus 8. So that means its range is minus infinity up to infinity, and its domain is minus infinity up to infinity, and its range is also minus infinity up to infinity. So in this case, in the square case, we have this range 0 up to infinity, but in the cube case we have minus infinity up to infinity. Now that was the range and domain. Now let's see how you graph a function. So to graph a function, first let's create a table. So let me create this table. So this is a table. Here we will put the domain, which will be the x values. Here we will put the range, which will be the y value. So for y equals x squared, when we put okay, let's start from minus 2. So minus 2, when I put minus 2, it gives me 4. When I input minus 1, it gives me 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, and 2, 4. So this will be our x coordinates, this will be our x coordinates, and these will be our y coordinates. So our first coordinate is minus 2 and 4. Our second coordinate is minus 1 and 1. Our third coordinate is 0, 0, which is the origin. Our fourth coordinate is 1, 1, and our fifth coordinate is 2, 4. So as a standard, you know, it's up to you whether you want to make a table of 10, 20. It's up to you. Usually I make a table of 4 or 5 inputs and outputs, the domain and range. So using the domain and range, we can create the graphs. So here, let me graph this. So here, let's say this is the origin. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4. I don't have a graph paper, so okay. So the first point was minus 2. When x is minus 2, y is 4. So you do it like this. Y is 4 when x is minus 2. So this is our first point. When x is minus 1, x is minus 1, our y is 1. So this is, so you know how do you join the points? You draw the vertical or and the horizontal lines for respectively for x-axis and y-axis, and that way you know the point that this is this point. This is going to be your minus 2 4, this is going to be minus 1 1. Now 0 0, for 0 0, as 0 0 is our origin, we are not going to do anything. We have 1 1 here, that is the point of 1 1, and we have 2 and 4. So 2 2 and 4, this is 2 4, this is our 1 1. Okay, now let's join the points. So this is our graph, this is our graph for y equals x squared. This is our graph for y equals x squared. So how do we know that the graph is like this? Why isn't the graph like this or this, or you know, how do we know that we have to join the points this way? So we are I've actually haven't studied it myself, and I actually don't know why do we do this. So we are going to study this when we go further, when I go further in chapter 7 at my university. But for now we should at least know that I at least know that the graph of y square equals x squared is like this, so I should stick to it. Now that was the graph thing. uh, that was the graph thing. Now let's come to our piecewise function. uh, no, alright, let me graph another function, y equals x cube. So here 1 2 3 4 5, 1 2 3 4 5, 1 2 3 4 5, 1 2 3 4 5. All right, so this is 1 2 3 4 5, 1 2 4 5, minus 1 minus 2, sorry, this is minus 1 2 3 4 5. All right, so y equals x cube. So let's first let's create a table. So this is x and this is y. So for y equals minus 2, x equals minus 2, the domain is minus 2, I get a range of minus 8, and I put y equals 1, minus 1, I get a range of minus 1, and I input 0 0, I input 1, we get 1, input 2, we get 8. So let's say this is 8, say this is minus 8, minus 7, yep. So for minus 2 we have minus 8, so minus 2 minus 8, so it's about here. We have minus 1 minus 1, it's about here. We have 0 0, we have 1 1, and we have 2, for 2 we have 8. So its graph is going to be like this. Its graph is going to be like this, because we can have negative values as range in the cube case as well, but in the square case we cannot have negative values. So its graph is only for for this graph, the range for y is always positive, but for this y can also be negative. So this was how you draw graphs, how you graph a function. Next we have two topics that are piecewise functions and greatest integer and least integer functions. So okay, so I'll skip this topic because it's a little complicated, the piecewise functions, but I'll get to what is the greatest integer and least integer function. So greatest integer function is a is denoted by it's a floor function, so it's like this, and any integer you put into it will output the value which is less or equal to this integer. So for example, if I input 2.5 and it's in the greatest integer function, which can also be called your floor function. So it will output the value. It will see that 2, it will output 2 because 2 is uh, because 2 is the most close and it's the greatest. It will output the value which should be less than or equal to the number, but it should be the greatest value. So here we have it will output us 2. But if we input a negative number, let's say minus 2.5, it won't output minus 2 because minus 2 is greater than minus 2.5. So instead it will output us minus 3 because it's greatest, because it's less than 2.5 but it's the greatest integer. So that is why it's called the greatest integer function. Same as the least integer function, which we call the ceiling function. So for example, it takes an input 2.5, so it will output you the value x should be greater than or equal to n, but it should be the least integer which is next to this integer. So what is this gonna output? It's going to output you 3 because 3 is greater than this, but it's the least greatest, and it's that's why it is also called a ceiling function. It is called a floor function. In this case, if you input a negative integer which is minus 2.5, so what is this going to output? It is going to output minus 2 because minus 2 is the closest number, which is the closest integer, which is greater than this, but it is the least greater. Means it is greater than 2.5. It is a greater integer, but it is the least integer of this value which we are calculating. So this is the least integer function, this is the least integer function, and this is the greatest integer function. Alright, I think I'm going out of time. Thank you guys so much. I really enjoyed this, and I hope you guys had now have an idea what is a function, how to grab them, and all of this. Thank you very much.